The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Anmer Hall, painting long, golden stripes across the plush carpet of the nursery. Princess Charlotte, a whirlwind of energy at her young age, was supposed to be tidying up her toys. A small mountain of plastic ponies, wooden blocks, and art supplies lay scattered where she and her brothers had been playing. But Charlotte's attention was not on the mess. It was on the hallway. The door to the sitting room across the hall was slightly ajar, and from within drifted the low, serious murmur of adult voices. Charlotte recognized them instantly. It was Granny and Grandpa, the king and queen consort, who had come for a visit. Their presence always meant a slightly more formal house, with more rules about curtsying and using her best manners. But today, the tone of their voices was different. It wasn't the cheerful, teasing tone they used with her. It was heavy, like the feeling in the air before a big thunderstorm. Curiosity, a powerful force in any child, tugged at her. Quiet as a little mouse, Charlotte abandoned her ponies and crept across the hallway. She pressed her small back against the cool, painted wall just beside the door frame, where she could hear, but not be seen. "It's becoming a rather persistent narrative," the king's voice was saying, a familiar rumble. "The Republicans are having a field day with it. The polling numbers are concerning." There was a soft clink of a teacup. "The press are circling like sharks, as always," the queen consort added, her voice carrying a note of weary frustration. "They've never quite forgiven her for being so popular, for breaking the mold. They build you up only to tear you down, and Catherine has been up for a very long time." Charlotte's brow furrowed. Catherine. That was Mummy. Why were they talking about Mummy? Her small heart began to beat a little faster. "It's the source of it that's the real poison," the king continued. "Coming from within. It's designed to wound, to isolate her within the family structure itself. The whispers about her being difficult, demanding, not putting the firm first. It's a calculated campaign." Charlotte didn't understand all the words. Republicans made her think of America, which was confusing. Firm was what Daddy sometimes called their work, but the tone was unmistakable. They were saying things about her mummy, things that sounded bad. "The worst part," the queen consort sighed, "is the implication that she's a social climber, that she engineered the entire relationship. It's so terribly unfair. She was a university student who fell in love, but the old guard, some of the courtiers, they've never accepted her. They see her middle-class background, her mother's former job as a flight attendant, her father's business, and they whisper that she's not one of us, that she's ambitious in a way that's unseemly." A cold, unfamiliar feeling settled in Charlotte's tummy. It wasn't the butterflies she got before a dance recital. This was a colder, heavier feeling. Flight attendant. She knew what that was. The nice ladies on the aeroplanes who brought her sweets. What did that have to do with Mummy, and what was wrong with Mummy's family? She loved Granny Carol and Grandpa Michael, and they were fun and loud and always gave the best hugs. "It's the doorstepping incidents that get to me." The king's voice was harder now. "Having to have police protection just to go to a shop or pick up her children from a play date because some photographer is hiding in the bushes, hoping to catch her looking stressed or frumpy to prove a point. It's a form of persecution. And all the while, she has to smile and wave and pretend everything is wonderful." "And she does it," the queen consort said, a note of pride in her voice. "She does it every single time. For William. For those children. She puts on the armor and she gets on with it. But it costs her. I see it in her eyes. There's a sadness there now. That wasn't there 10 years ago. A wariness. A sadness in Mummy's eyes. Charlotte thought of her mother's eyes, And they were the color of hazelnuts, and they sparkled when she laughed, and they were soft and warm at bedtime. Could they be sad when Charlotte wasn't looking? The thought was unbearable. "The tragedy is," the king concluded, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper, "she is the best thing to happen to this family in a generation. Her work with early childhood is groundbreaking. Her grace under pressure is exemplary. She is the future queen, and she will be magnificent. But they will never stop. They will pick at her and whisper about her and try to diminish her until her dying day, all because she wasn't born in the right postcode." The word dying hit Charlotte like a physical blow. It ricocheted around in her mind, a terrifying echo. Why would Mummy die? People were whispering about her. Bad people. A cold feeling in her stomach turned into a sharp, stabbing pain. She wanted to burst into the room, to shout at Granny and Grandpa that they were wrong, that her mummy was the best mummy in the whole world, that she wasn't any of those things. But her legs felt frozen, rooted to the spot. A hot tear escaped from the corner of her eye and traced a wet path down her cheek. Then, the sound of a door opening further down the hall snapped her out of her trance. It was the boy's nanny, Maria, probably coming to check on the tidying up. Panic seized Charlotte. If Maria saw her, she'd know she'd been eavesdropping. Wiping her face furiously with the back of her hand, she scurried back into the nursery, her heart hammering against her ribs. She stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by her forgotten toys, and feeling more alone and confused than she had ever felt in her whole life. The world, which had always seemed so bright and safe, suddenly felt full of shadows and whispers. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur for Charlotte. She went through the motions, joining her brothers for their supervised playtime with Grandpa, who bounced George on his knee and told them silly jokes. Charlotte managed a weak smile, but her mind was elsewhere. She watched her mother during the early evening, a new, sharp focus to her gaze. She saw how Catherine gracefully accepted a cup of tea from a staff member, her smile impeccable. But now Charlotte looked for the cracks. She saw how her mother's shoulders seemed to tense for a second when a phone buzzed loudly. She saw the way her eyes flickered just for a moment towards the windows, as if checking for something. The sadness Granny had spoken of. Could she see it now? A flicker of something deep and hidden, like a fish moving just below the surface of a calm lake. Dinner was a subdued affair for the children, eaten in the nursery with Maria. Charlotte pushed her vegetables around her plate, her usual appetite gone. All she could think about was bedtime. Bedtime was Mummy and Daddy's time. No matter what state visits or important meetings they'd had, one of them, usually Mummy, always came to tuck them in. It was their sacred rule. And tonight, Charlotte had a question burning a hole in her heart. Finally, the moment came. She was in her pajamas, the soft cotton smelling of lavender from the dryer, her hair brushed and plaited. She was in her bed, the duvet pulled up to her chin, a stuffed puppy tucked under her arm. She heard the soft footsteps in the hallway, and then the door creaked open, spilling a warm, golden light from the corridor into her dark room. It was Daddy. Prince William's tall frame filled the doorway. He smiled, that familiar, crinkly-eyed smile that always made Charlotte feel safe. "Evening, my little one," he said softly, closing the door behind him and padding over to her bed. The room was now lit only by her small nightlight, shaped like a crescent moon. He sat on the edge of her bed, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. "Maria said you were a bit quiet at dinner. Feeling all right?" He reached out and gently placed the back of his hand on her forehead, the way he always did to check for a temperature. Charlotte looked up at him. In the dim light, his face was all kind shadows. She loved her daddy. Oh, he was strong and funny and made the best voices when he read stories. But it was Mummy she needed. Mummy who always knew the right thing to say, who smelled of flowers, and whose hugs could fix any bumped head or broken toy. "Where's Mummy?" Charlotte asked, her voice small. "She's just finishing up a call, Poppet. She'll be right in. She wanted me to come and start the tucking in process." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "How was your day? Grandpa said you were very quiet when you were building with the blocks." Charlotte didn't answer. She just stared at the pattern on her duvet. The question was there, right on the tip of her tongue, but it felt too big, too heavy to let out. What if Daddy got angry that she'd been listening? What if he said it wasn't true, that she'd imagined it? But she hadn't imagined it. She'd heard it. But just then, the door opened again, and this time, it was her. Catherine slipped into the room, a vision in a soft gray cashmere jumper. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked tired, Charlotte thought. The shadows under her eyes seemed darker than usual. "Sorry, my love," Catherine whispered to William, before turning her full, radiant smile on Charlotte. "Hello, my darling girl. Ready for snuggles?" The dam broke. "Mummy!" Charlotte's voice was a choked cry. She threw herself forward, launching herself from the pillows into her mother's arms. Catherine, startled, caught her deftly, wrapping her arms around her small, trembling body. Hey, sweetheart, what's this?" Catherine murmured, her voice full of concern. She sat down properly on the bed, settling Charlotte on her lap. And William's smile faded, replaced by a look of sharp attention. He moved closer, his hand resting on Charlotte's back. Charlotte buried her face in the soft wool of her mother's jumper, breathing in her familiar, comforting scent. The tears she had been holding back all afternoon finally came, hot and silent. Her small shoulders shook with the effort of not sobbing out loud. "Charlotte, darling, talk to us," William said gently, his voice low and calm. "What's wrong? Did you have a bad dream?" Charlotte shook her head against her mother's chest, her plait swishing from side to side. She pulled back slightly, her face blotchy and wet, her blue eyes wide with a confusion and fear that made both parents' hearts clench. "I heard Granny and Grandpa talking," she whispered, her voice trembling. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly, and it was as if the temperature had dropped a few degrees. William and Catherine exchanged a quick, loaded glance over Charlotte's head. A silent communication passed between them, a mixture of concern, understanding, and a flicker of anger. "What did you hear, my love?" Catherine asked, her voice carefully even, though her arms tightened almost imperceptibly around her daughter. Charlotte looked from her mother's face to her father's. "They were talking about you, Mummy," she said, her lower lip wobbling dangerously. They said people are whispering about you. Bad things. That you're difficult, and that you only married Daddy because you wanted to be in the family." The last words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would make them less painful. "And they said people want to make you sad. And that you have to have policemen just to go to the shop, and that they will whisper about you until you die." The word hung in the air, heavy and terrible. Catherine's face went pale, a flicker of raw pain crossing her features before she masterfully smoothed it away. William's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching visibly. He looked towards the door, as if he could see through it, down the hall to where his parents were, a complex mix of frustration and protectiveness warring within him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Catherine simply held Charlotte, rocking her gently.